Great news! A new, revised version of Marty Brownstein's book, now called The Righteous Few, Two Who Made a Difference, has been released by Square One Publishers Incorporated. Available through Amazon.com and SquareOnePublishers.com. Now also available as an audiobook from Audible.com. Narrated by the author, Marty Brownstein.
So now we are going to move on to our speaker. Our speaker today is Marty Brownstein, and I'm going to read you an introduction so that you have a better understanding of who Marty is and what you're going to see today. A story of inspiration and values relevant for our lives today is what you will learn about in the presentation and discussion led today by speaker Marty Brownstein, author of the book, Two Among the Righteous Few, a story of courage in the Holocaust. Since the book came out in the fall of 2011, Marty has been sharing this special story in a wide variety of venues, including workplaces and professional conferences, and in many other metropolitan areas beyond his home base of the Bay Area. This is quite a different story from what Marty's normal work had been. For over 25 years, he led a management consulting firm called the Practical Solutions Group, serving a variety of clients across many industries on issues of leadership and organizational effectiveness, including Meyer. Okay, so a few of you who have been here a long time may remember Marty doing our training. This is way back in time. Dion remembers, 1999, 2000. Okay, he was a trainer for us. Through his work, Marty wrote 8 books related to business management, from contributing author to sole author, including Communicating Effectively for Dummies, Coaching and Mentoring for Dummies, and Managing Teams for Dummies. Okay, I did not hire him because I needed him to work with dummies. Okay, but I do have all of those books on my bookshelf in case anybody wants to check them out and read them. His 9th book is the focus of today's presentation, and it's quite different and special. This book takes Marty back to his early career as an educator when he was teaching history, including the Holocaust. This true and remarkable story has a meaningful personal connection as well, which Marty will reveal in his engaging storytelling presentation. Because you're in the workshop today, Marty's book is being provided to you, and after the conclusion of the program, we will have a book signing in the back if you would each like a copy of the book. Okay? With that, please give a warm welcome to our speaker, Marty Brownstein.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, you're ready, because I'm going to throw you a question to start with. How do you make a positive difference in doing your job today? Because I've got a powerful story for you this afternoon that's all about making a positive difference. And I'm going to want that theme to resonate with you throughout as you hear the story. Because think about it. If you took to your job every day that your approach is, I'm here to make a positive difference, and everybody you worked with took the same approach, wow, what an impact that would have on both the business and the culture you're looking to build here. Those guiding principles would really come alive and thrive. That's what this is all about. And so what I'm going to be doing with you in our first hour, I'm going to take you into a good story. And I hope you like storytelling, because I've never met someone who doesn't like to hear a good story. And after we get through the story, we'll take a few minutes of questions about the story. And then we're going to move on from there. And we're going to be talking about how do you apply the lessons of the story in your job today. And then we're going to ask you at the end to make a commitment. In fact, take a look at page 1 in your handout. And this is meant for you to write in, take notes as we go through it. Because at the close of our workshop, see the question there on page 1? And then it has the follow-up question underneath it. You're going to be asked to make a commitment. What actions can you take away and apply in your job today that this story is teaching you that's all about making a positive difference? So I'm going to want you to be thinking about that throughout. Now let me get you into the story. And to start you into this remarkable story, I'm going to have you think about 3 questions. So question number 1, would you be willing to help others whose lives are in great danger? Think about that for a moment. It's actually a tough question. Question 2, would you be willing to help others whose lives are in great danger, knowing if you get involved, you probably put your life in great danger? Would you still help? And question 3, Would you be willing to help others whose lives are in great danger, knowing if you get involved, you probably put your life in great danger when these people who most need the help, most everybody else wants to hate them or be indifferent to their plight? Would you still get involved and help? Well, as you see the title of the book here, Two Among the Righteous Few, A Story of Courage in the Holocaust, is a true story of a Christian couple that answered a definite yes in a time period when most everybody else said no. They are true heroes. And though I say to give this book its just due, I should say its title is this: Twee tussen de rechtvaardige enkelen en verhaal van moed in de Holocaust. That's the title of this book translated into Dutch. For the story takes place in the Netherlands, commonly referred to as Holland, during World War II and the Holocaust. And this couple will in fact take you to page 2 in your handout, and we'll go to the next slide to introduce you to them. And that's a picture of them at the end of World War II, Franz and Mien Weinacher. Just a young married couple. And in brief, who were they? Next slide, please. That's who they were. And you see the top line? Nothing special about them. They were not well educated. They had no great success in business or any other ventures of life. In fact, if you went in the Netherlands today, traveled into any major Dutch city, went up to any Dutch citizen and said, please tell me about Franz and Mien Weinacher, here's what most would say. Well, I don't know who they are. But you see that second line. At one point in their life, they're going to do something so extraordinary, it teaches us lessons for our lives today and as we go forward, which is what's kept me going on the journey with this story. In fact, we'll go see their picture, next slide again. In my storytelling presentation with you this afternoon, what I'm going to first do is I'm going to paint a little bit of the historical picture in which the story takes place. We'll touch upon World War II in Europe, the Holocaust, and in particular, life in the Netherlands during World War II when it was under Nazi Germany occupation, the worst of all the countries in Western Europe. That picture I'll paint first will help you understand when I talk about who they were and what they end up doing that later will earn them a heroic honor. You're going to see how remarkable and unusual that was. And the last thing that I'll cover in my presentation, as you heard in the introduction, I also have a very meaningful personal connection to this story. But I always save that for the last part. And we'll take a few minutes of questions on the story before we shift into the discussion and applying the lessons from it. But a quick pause before I get into this. This is actually a story I stumbled into by accident on a trip to the Netherlands with my wife in May of 2009. Then I was very involved in that management consulting business. Never would have expected I'd end up writing a book about this couple. And here's the part I would expect even less that has happened. It has sent me now, since I got the book done, on an unexpected journey. This journey now is well into 7 years. I'm more than an author who once promoted a book. People often say you're an author on a journey with a mission to keep sharing this story, because audiences tell me you have to keep sharing this story. Not only do I take this story into workplaces and professional conferences, but all sorts of venues, places of education, places of faith, all sorts of service organizations, many I never knew existed before. In fact, today in the 7 years, 8th year is coming this fall. Events are already booked. This is event number 600. I count this morning. Do I count it as 1 or 2? My wife always debates that. We'll go event number 630 in these 7 years. Never would have expected it. And I've had people become supporters along the way. I have a support list. Sometimes they sign up. Yeah, I'll be happy to spread the word. You have something happen. Or they're the ones that made me connections to get to these places that say, come speak in our organization. And one of those supporters is here today. In fact, I was able to reconnect with her after been a few years, and when she heard about this, she said, this would fit so well for the place I work in. You know her as Jenny Bledsoe, so thank you, Jenny, for making this event happen. Let me get you into the story now. And we're going to see what you know about your history. No test, don't worry. But I'm going to throw a few questions out. Guesses are welcome. Doesn't work right or wrong, just throw the guess out. And by the way, if you guess correctly, see Dion for prizes afterwards here. Well, I said the story takes place during World War II in Europe. When does World War II in Europe begin and where? Very good. That's the when? Where? Very good. If you're playing Jeopardy, get this gentleman on your team. Very good. Very good. Aha. Well, a country has invaded Poland on that date of September 1st, 1939. We'll hold him off from answering just yet. What country has invaded Poland to start the war? Germany. Very good, very good. What is your name, by the way? My name is Mark. I'll just keep simple here. Yes. Thank you, Mark. And thank you for the encouragement of these people. No, you guys know something here. Yes, Germany has invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939. The other powers of Europe at that time, Britain and France, 2 days later, declared war against Germany because of that invasion. By the way, we'll see if they go to the movies here at Meyer. It's now been at least 5 years that this movie won the Academy Award. It was The King's Speech. How many people saw the movie? All right, a few of you get to the movies. Okay, the rest of you, get out there sometime. For those who saw that movie, and don't worry if you haven't, the culmination of that movie, this is a movie about King George VI of Great Britain, had that stuttering problem, and he works on it. And in the culmination scene of that movie, he's giving this nationwide speech in Great Britain on September 3rd, 1939. What was he talking about in that speech? That's right. It was the official declaration of war by Great Britain because of the invasion 2 days earlier by Germany. And the Poles were excited. Yay, World War II is breaking out, and the British and French are going to help us against these nasty Germans. And they didn't. They didn't come, exactly. By the end of September, Poland's fallen. It's even divided up with the Soviet Union taking the eastern half. And then there was quiet. In fact, if you looked at newspaper headlines around the world over the next 6+ months, a headline you would sometimes see was this: phony war. This war must not be real because Britain and France said they're going to attack Germany because of that invasion, and they sat there. Well, this war won't stay quiet with just a few countries involved. Back to, if you go to the movies here, this was just this year's Academy Award nominated movies. There were two that were very much about this time period. How many people saw Dunkirk and The Darkest Hour? All right, those you're going to see what this was like. This is the scariest time in the world's history. Because when spring 1940, and that's where both those movies are at that point, the phony war period was over. Germany is now on its offensive through Western Europe, Northern Europe, and other parts to come soon after. And this is very scary. And Europe now is erupting and erupting, and it kept erupting, and World War II in Europe finally ended when? Mark knows. Go ahead, make your guesses before we have Mark help. Say again? 44. Very good guess, off just a little bit. 45, went the right direction, yes. Ah, very close. In Europe, it ends close to June, by the way. Let's see if they know their months here. What month might be close to June? May, very good, very good. May, good, good. I know it's not the busy season yet here, but all right. So May of 45, it ends in Europe. August of 45, when Japan and Asia surrendered, World War II was finally done worldwide. World War II, still true today with all wars that came before it and all wars that have come since. When this one was finally over, this is the most destructive war in humankind's history by far. When it was finally over, you ended up with over 60 countries committing troops into this awful war, billions of dollars of property damage worldwide, and over 50 million people died worldwide in this awful war, the most by far ever. And one of the things that we saw in this war that we had not quite seen as prevalent before, unfortunately way too common since. More than half of that 50 million plus people were civilians. So it was not just soldiers dying at a high rate. By the way, I'll throw you an exception to that. This one particular country will commit lots of troops into World War II. We'll end up with over 400,000 of its soldiers dying in World War II, but will not have civilian casualties. What country is that? That's right, because it really wasn't fought on our soil. But that's not true if you lived on the continent of Europe. Nearly 2/3 of the death and destruction in this awful war took place throughout all of Europe. For the average citizen of Europe during this 5+ year time period, your life was basically a nightmare trying to survive. And that's where Franz and me and Weinacher lived. You don't want to be there. Now, the next question we're going to explore as we look at the greater historical picture behind this story, Holocaust, capital H, the event. It actually got its beginnings before World War II started in September 39. Its beginnings go all the way back to 1933. In what country does the Holocaust begin? Very good. And this is always frightens me when I explain it. Because at the start of 1933, Germany was a democracy. And through the democratic process, this man got appointed to the position of chancellor, like prime minister. A short time after coming into that office, he creates excuses to throw democracy out the window in Germany. One-party dictatorship rule takes over the country, and the persecution that became part of the Holocaust began right away. Of course, who am I talking about? That's right. Well, the Holocaust will not just stay in Germany. Before the war broke out in Europe in September of '39, it's already spread into Austria and then into Czechoslovakia. And then when the war broke out, it will spread throughout the whole continent of Europe into North Africa. And the Holocaust finally ended when? Very good, Mark. Yes. When World War II ended May of '45, the Holocaust ended May of '45. Two separate events happening on simultaneous tracks. This event, you've all heard of it, Holocaust, in one sentence. Define what was the Holocaust. Persecution or extermination of Jews, yes, yes. All right on track. And others. There we go. Absolutely. In fact, Mark's a step ahead of me at the moment, so hang on one moment. Yes, yes. Yeah. So Mark's answering my next question I haven't asked yet. But no, thank you. You're right on track. This was here, I'll give you, kind of put this all together. Let me give you the definition I used. This was a nation-sponsored, systematic, and racist effort to persecute, isolate, then mass murder. People saying extermination, genocide, yes, mass murder. Millions of people on Adolf Hitler's list of so-called undesirables or inferiors. When the Holocaust was finally over after 12 years, you had over 11 million people murdered in the Holocaust, on top of what was happening in the war itself. Well, as I think most of you know, the number one target list was whom? There are going to be 6 million out of that 11 million. And if you look at that number alone, so frightening, over 3/4 of the population of the greater Bay Area today. If you go to the start of 1933, before this begins, that was nearly 2 out of every 3 European Jew that will not be alive by May of '45. Of the other 5 million plus victims in the Holocaust, who were some of them? Gypsies, yes. People with disabilities, good. Keep going. Mark was already answering some of this. Homosexuals, very good. Here's a big part of the list. Anybody, communist, anybody who spoke out, you were viewed as a political dissident, you're a target. Jehovah's Witnesses, not because of their religion. They weren't marching along in Germany, they were speaking out. Boom, you were a target. And here's another group, variety of people to it. People of Slavic heritage, which takes in a number of nationalities through parts of Europe. Non-Jewish Poles were the largest number out of that. It was a big list, and the Jews top on that list. And if you're on that list during this time period, not is your life a nightmare, it's doomed, and in most cases, it will be too late before you can figure that out. You will be captured and eventually murdered. But a refugee crisis broke out in the late 1930s before the war began, because some people sensed the doom was coming. And if you're one of those refugees wanting to now become a refugee because you need to get out of this area, and you sought the help of any government during this time period, and there were many that could have helped these refugees in dire need. Here's a few that could have helped most of all. You probably have heard of these countries. Canada, Great Britain, the United States. How many governments were willing to help these refugees in dire need? Say that out loud, Dion. That's right. We won't see much from governments throughout this whole period. What you will see throughout the continent of Europe, let alone the world, is a handful of people who had the courage and compassion to say, this is wrong and I should try to help. Franz and Weinoch were among those, unfortunately too few, but they cared when most didn't. Now my last main question, as we look at the greater historical picture in which this story takes place, let's go to when the United States enters World War II. When do we come in? And when in '41? December, yes, yes. And December 8th to be exact, because of what happened on December 7th of 1941, which was? All right, Americans know that one. Japan has attacked our naval base there in Hawaii. And on December 8th, the next day, President Roosevelt declares war against Japan because of that attack. Well, Japan is part of this military alliance at that time known as the Axis powers with Italy and Germany. And when we declared war against Japan, Italy and Germany turned around and said, all right, United States, we're declaring war against you. And the United States' response was, fine, vice versa to you. We're finally going to come into World War II, and I take you back into Europe. The war in Europe, and we really don't show up until 42, the war in Europe is already over 2 years old before the United States has shown up. What's the situation in the war at this time? What's happened? Who's winning? Germany's winning. There's actually other allies helping them. How much are they winning? A lot. I love the big words that summarize this well. That's exactly right. They are winning so much in Europe. How many countries in Europe are still standing and trying to fight the Germans and their allies? How many are left? You're too high. One is getting very close. There's actually two. Actually, we jumped to the map here already. So, all right, we'll tell you this, and we'll identify who. There are two left. And we'll talk about how they're doing and who they are. Let me tell you what you're seeing on the map here. The little more shaded to the south are other countries that have joined with Italy and Germany to be part of the Axis alliance, in particular Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria. So they got others helping. And what you see that is mostly the white are the so-called neutrals. You see Switzerland in the middle, Spain and Portugal to the west, Turkey to the east, Sweden up north. Now here's what's happening with the neutrals. So they're not fighting, they're not in the war directly, but they're actually in the war. All the neutrals at this point were actively supplying the Germans with war material needs, hoping they don't change their mind and attack them. And the rest of Europe has been conquered and now occupied by Nazi Germany by the start of 1942. They are dominating this continent like we've never seen in the world before. It is frightening. What's left? Two countries. Well, the dark shade in the west, Great Britain. They're still there. And we'll talk about how they're doing. Back to, I'll take you to the movies again. If you saw a couple years ago, got nominated for an Oscar, should have won the Oscar that year, but they don't ask me to vote. Imitation Game. How many people saw that movie? All right, good. I'll talk to you guys here for a moment. Don't worry if you haven't seen it. Go rent it. At the start of that movie is the start of 1942 in Great Britain. How was Britain doing at that point in the war? Not good. Again, I love the big words that summarize this well. Exactly right. At this point in time, by the start of 1942, Great Britain had been bombed and battered repeatedly by the German Air Force. All over the country, London in particular. And the British people were very, very nervous. Even though Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister, trying to rally their spirits, they were all wondering, when are German forces going to come across the North Sea and start invading? Come on, United States, get in here. You can't get in here fast enough. They're hanging on, but not doing well. The other country still standing is worse off. And it's in the far east, USSR, otherwise known as the Soviet Union. Now, this is just a map of Europe. The Asia portion of the Soviet Union, untouched, it's okay. That was the Soviet Union then, and it doesn't exist today. But how's the European portion doing? Well, in the last 6 months of 1941, Germany broke this pact they had with the Soviet Union as we won't touch each other. Baloney to that. And now German forces, who had half of Poland, went conquering east, 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 east. They're within 20 miles of the capital of Moscow at this point. The Soviet Union was almost ready to collapse before the United States has shown up. The most frightening time in the world's history. And what's happened into the Holocaust? It's already now into its third and final phase, known as the final solution. The mass murder phase is underway. Because as troops went conquering east, what came in after them? Murder squads. 1.5 million people have been lined up and shot to death, primarily Jews in these parts of Eastern Europe. And by 42, all the concentration camps are going, and the 6 main death camps in Poland, that murder people are just operating like a machine. What summarizes this time period, we'll go to the next slide, is this. And we've been seeing parallels in the news at that first point, the word hate there. You see parallels in the news the last few years. When hate leads, what groups do, death and destruction follows. But among the many factors that turned the Holocaust into the horrific tragedy it became, probably the number one is that word indifference. Now, it's not a terrible word by itself. It's really an attitude that starts to happen in people's lives, not all people's lives, but some, at a certain age. And Jenny knows the age. She's seen it in her own household. You know what age it starts to show up in people's lives? Teenagers, that's right. You got one? Oh, you suffer through, yes, yes. Anyone got a teenager at home? Good luck to you, yes. You know, that's that attitude. Now, it's not harmful by itself, and many do outgrow it as they get into adulthood, but many do not. What's the word indifference mean? And Mark demonstrated it very well. What's it mean? Do you know?
You're indifferent when there's differences going on.
It means you don't care. That's it. You just don't care. That's right. No big deal out of a teenager, but it really becomes a bigger deal when life gets where we need people who care. And that's what made the Holocaust so horrific. So many people would not care. And as you're going to see in here, more people willing to help the Nazis carry out their brutality and murder than there were ever to speak out against it or try to help. Franz and Weihnacht were different than most. They cared. And now I'm going to take you into their country. We'll go to the next slide and take you to the Netherlands here. And as we go into this here, whoops, so we went through page 3. Sorry, I forgot to mention it earlier. I'm going to take you into page 4 now as we get into their life in the Netherlands during the war. By the way, this is not a big country area-wise. There you see the map. If you drive 3-4 hours in any direction, you've hit the whole country. You're not out of Northern California. Just to get you a sense of it, you could probably fit about 4 or 5 Hollands area-wise to fill the state of California. It is densely populated. Today, this is the most densely populated country in Europe. Nearly 17 million people live there now. Just prior to the war, 9 million. By the way, how many people have ever traveled to the Netherlands here? All right, a few of you. Good. Yes, one here. Traveled, yes, good. There's the major city, the most prominent city and largest city of the country, Amsterdam. Tourists all go there. Size of San Francisco. The capital, The Hague, also beautiful city. Rotterdam, those are the 3 largest cities. So the greatest, Utrecht, they didn't leave, oh, there's Utrecht, 4th largest city. So the major population is towards the west of the country. By the way, of those who've been to the Netherlands again, let me see your hands, you've traveled there. How many of you got past Amsterdam? Great. I'll be coming to you for geography assistance a little bit later on. Don't worry, it's not a test. It's actually quite simple. Because often tourists, if you go to the Netherlands, everyone goes to Amsterdam. But there's more to the country than the major city. It's like saying the only thing you ever visited in California was San Francisco. That ain't the whole state. Well, when the war broke out in September of 1939, the Dutch government said, oh, we're going to be neutral. Let the big boys fight it out. Leave us out of this. The Netherlands was neutral during World War I, and we're left out of it. So, hoping for the same. By the way, there's a country to the south of the Netherlands, smaller in area, also densely populated, and it's called Belgium. They say, yes, we want to be neutral too. Not going to be their choice. There's a major country on their eastern border, and you just see a piece of it in this map. It's called Germany. And they were making the decisions of who we're going to leave neutral for now and who not. It is spring 1940. The Germans are now on their major offensive, attacking into northern and western Europe with other parts to come soon after, and Holland was on the list. In the wee hours of May 10th, 1940, German forces come over the eastern border of Holland, and they started attacking. Poor little Holland, trying to cling to its neutrality, never got anything really coordinated with the so-called powers of Britain and France, who reality couldn't help them much anyway. Mighty France comes under attack, relatively the same time period. Don't remind the French of this. They'll surrender in less than 6 weeks. Poor little Holland, left on its own to fight, surrendered in 1 week. By the way, as I've been on this journey for 7 years now in a variety of places I've spoken in, occasionally I've had people in my audience, I'm talking here in the United States, who were children in the Netherlands at this time. And when I even raised this, sometimes I had a few just yelled out, 5 days! Okay. They remember like it was yesterday. Because as the week was rolling on, and 5 days really pretty much over after that, it was over. As the week was going on, the Dutch forces putting up a pretty good fight, which the German commanders did not like or really expect. German commanders turned to the Dutch government and said, ultimatum, you either surrender now or we start bombing. And where we're going to target first? Your major commercial port city of Rotterdam. So what are you going to do? So the Prime Minister talks it over with his cabinet and with the Queen, Queen Wilhelmina. And they say, you know, we don't want this destruction of our soil. They go to their commanding general, General Winckelmann. Yeah, we're fighting hard, but yeah, we can't keep up much longer. Well, General Winckelmann, we don't want this destruction. You hurry up and negotiate surrender terms with the Germans to prevent this. Okay, I will. Follows his orders. By the way, a ship was waiting for the royal family and the government leaders, and it took them across the North Sea to a place called London, England, where they will be a government in exile for the rest of the war. Good luck, Dutch people, and out they went. Government of Poland did the same thing. They're out there too with them in London, as 7 other countries had governments in exile in London. And so good luck, Dutch people, and out they went, and then the official surrender was made. And the German commander said, thank you very much, and then they said this, their words, excuse us, sorry, we had a miscommunication. They bombed Rotterdam to smithereens. For those who've been to the Netherlands, did you go visit Rotterdam? Yeah, and tourists don't do it often, and certainly some people have. I have visited there once in my travels now to this country. And why I say it's a nice city today. It took many years to rebuild because after it got bombed, instantly 1,000 people were killed, 85,000 left homeless, and the industrial center of the city wiped out. So this city was pretty nearly destroyed. It doesn't have the historic beauty today as so many cities in Europe like Amsterdam, The Hague. It looks like a dull American city today. And a new day began in the Netherlands, because the Germans are going to put their own man in charge as the ruling governor. His name was Arthur Seyss-Inquart. By the way, like Adolf Hitler, he was an Austrian Nazi. And he will surround himself with his henchmen to run the country. And that occupation and control by Nazi Germany in the Netherlands will last 5 miserable years, the worst of all the countries in Western Europe. And as we go to the next slide, we're going to explore what was this occupation like. Well, there are 4 main areas of emphasis of how the Germans ran this country that they occupied, the Netherlands. And we'll go to the first one, please. Control the flow of information, meaning the news that people receive. Well, in those days, 1940s, what were the major sources of how people got their news? Yes, newspaper and radio, very good. Those 2. Television coming soon, not there quite yet. Internet, what the heck is that? Al Gore has not invented it yet. So it becomes much easier to control this because what happens? Nazi censorship takes over the newspapers. Their propaganda rules the day. And in terms of radios, before 1940 was out, the Germans issued a nationwide decree in the Netherlands. Don't listen to your radio. You can look at it, don't listen to it. Shut them off. Now there's a hard order to enforce. And as the war is going on, if you've ignored that order, which bothers the Germans, you start picking up these secret broadcasts coming out of London. The BBC, Radio Orange. The Dutch government in exile set up its own radio station where even the Queen would broadcast at times. And by mid-1943, if you were listening to those secret broadcasts, here's what you'd be hearing. The truth about the war. A year and a half before, the Germans were dominating the whole continent of Europe. Now they're starting to suffer defeat after defeat on the battlefield. The tide of the war is changing. The Germans do not want people to know this. You do not want to give people any hope. September 1943, the Nazi authorities in the Netherlands, nationwide order. All Dutch citizens, turn in your radios. And they work hard to collect radios out of 9 million people. And many of the Dutch, of course, when the order came, okay, I'll go turn in my radio, follow the rules. Interesting, when the order came, Franz Weinacher hid his radio. He never turned it in. Keep that in mind. Franz didn't quite mindlessly go follow rules like most everybody else. Now, a second emphasis of how they ran the country was this: exploit all resources. Well, Netherlands is well developed economically, and even more so today, so there's resources to be had the Germans need. Parts, raw materials, food. They take it from the Netherlands, don't care about the economic effect on the people there, and put it into Germany to feed their forces and their people. And in terms of exploiting resources, this is what scared the Dutch the most: people. See, the Germans have this labor shortage. And so to make up for this labor shortage, the term came out, forced labor. See, the Germans don't have enough of their own able-bodied young men, let alone young women, to work the factories and fields to support this huge war machine they need to build and manufacture. By the way, where were those people? Why aren't they there to do those jobs? Where are they? That's right, the front lines of the war, and actually 2 wars. The military one we call World War II, they had over 10 million soldiers involved. This other one we call the Holocaust, again, well over 1 million people involved in all these concentration camp and related operations. So they have a major labor shortage. How'd they make up for it? And again, this is where the term forced labor comes. From the countries they occupied in Europe, from many of them, they said, you come work in Germany. The Netherlands was right next door, very convenient. During the course of the war, 350,000 Dutch citizens went into forced labor, went to work in Germany. 30,000 did not come home alive when this is over. Some came home disabled. Once the Dutch figured out what this was, no thank you, that's not a job assignment I want. Not your choice if it comes your way. Later in the war, Franz Weinacher received notice. Time for you to go work in Germany. A major obstacle he has to try to overcome. And by the way, anybody have a teenage son, late teens, early 20s in their household? Yours is, but give him another year or two, because I'll just throw this in terms of resources. In the last 6 months of the war in the Netherlands, the Germans were going after young Dutch men, late teens, early 20s. Take a guess what they wanted them for. Say again? That's it. To conscript them in the German army, to go fight, because they're running out of their own soldiers. That's not a job most anybody wants. You're now basically cannon fodder at this point. The Germans are losing, but they're going to fight to the death. Guess who went into hiding in large numbers in the last 6 months of the war? Young Dutch men. You don't want to be in the German army. So this is a very tough time in the Netherlands. Well, let me now hit the third emphasis, how they ran the country. Stamp out resistance in any form it shows. Not surprising, one of the first forms of resistance you see in the Netherlands, underground newspapers, because they had already taken over the regular newspapers and put their censorship into them. And when the Dutch got conquered, and the same thing would happen here today, they're not ready to resist much. But in time, you start to see things happen. Protests, strikes. Oh, please, don't get involved, because the German response showed no patience. It was brutal. Probably the first major protest and strike, and there'll be just a handful during the war in the Netherlands. The first one took place in Amsterdam in late February 1941, known as the Workers' Strike. And this is what led up to the strike happening. During that month, for the first time, the Germans had rounded up over 400 young Jewish men in Amsterdam and shipped them off to a concentration camp, because these young Jewish men were fighting back against Dutch Nazi hoodlums trying to terrorize the Jewish population, and they beat the you-know-what out of them. Well, the Germans didn't like it. Well, let's just ship them out. This will be one of the few, if any, occasions in all of Europe this occurred that non-Jews rose up because of an action taken against their fellow Jews in their country. And it was done by the first organized resistance group, the Communists. And in Amsterdam, they appealed to the dock workers. For those who visit Amsterdam, there's actually a big statue of this today near the Portuguese synagogue. And they said, dock workers, let's go out and protest what they've done to our fellow Jews and just the oppression that we're living under. It's not just dock workers who go out on strike and protest. The first day of this event, 100,000 plus people in Amsterdam have hit the streets. Everything is just shut down. Day two, it's now spread to a half dozen cities around the country. The German authorities are very upset. Here's how they're going to deal with it, and it's going to be a pattern you will see coming forward. They just send in troops into the crowd and fire away. Massive arrests. By the way, 9 got killed, 45 wounded, and then they go after the instigators for making this awful disturbance happen. They didn't care if they fully got that right. And those so-called instigators, 18, will all get executed in near time. That becomes a common response. Throughout the war, if you want to get into big protest, it just gets more brutal as it goes. And by the way, the last major protest that occurred in the country is during the last winter of the war. As I mentioned in the group this morning, I don't always cover this in my presentation, but occasionally when I do, and I always remember still today, it was one of my early presentations. This gentleman was starting to cry on me. Why is he crying? I found out after he visited, when he actually thanked me for the presentation, he was in the Netherlands at this time as a little boy. It's called the Hunger Winter. It started when the railway workers went out on strike in September of 1944. The Dutch government in exile kept getting messages, stop helping the Germans. By you keeping the trains running, that of course they're shipping out materials and they're shipping out people. Stop! Okay, but we all better go into hiding. Well, the major population centers are in the West. And the Germans, of course, that's where they had the greatest number of their forces and people. And they said, fine, we'll use our own trucks and trains to get supplies and food and materials we need, and good luck to the rest of you, because we're kind of like shutting off the door there. That winter gets called the Hunger Winter because what ends up happening is it's also a very cold winter. People start going on scavenger hunts out of those western cities, trying to find food, eating tulips, trying to survive, freezing. Over 15,000 people starved to death in that hunger winter, the last winter of the war. The Allies didn't quite get around to helping them out a whole lot. These were tough times that people were living under in the Netherlands. And what you're going to also see start happening in the Netherlands in time as the war goes on is these people get involved in these dangerous core resistance groups, like doing sabotage, hit and run attacks. Please don't be in my neighborhood. Again, another gentleman at a presentation I had, he grew up in the Netherlands after the war, but he always remembered his relatives telling him 10 to 1. We hit one of theirs, or even just one of the Dutch Nazis helping them, they're going to take out at least 10 other people. February 1943, one of the high-ranking Dutch Nazi traitors helping the Germans run the country was in the capital city of The Hague. In February of 1943, his doorbell rang one night. He opens it up. 2 Dutch resistance fighters from the communist group targeting this guy, shot him dead. When the head of the SS operations in the Netherlands, the security arm of the Nazi machine to enforce its will on the people, his name was Hans Rauter, the most brutal and feared man in the country. When he got a wind of what happened, he ordered 50 people rounded up and executed and made sure the public would know this. And this would be the start of a reign of terror that would be commonplace in the Netherlands through the rest of 1943, all of 1944, until the country was fully liberated in May of 45. Tough economic times on top of all this too. This is where Franz and Maine Weinacher lived, not a place you wanted to be. Well, I said there were 4 main areas of emphasis, and I've covered the first 3. And here was number 4, which was their number 1 priority. And this is what it was. Persecute, isolate, and then deport to the death camps in Poland the entire Jewish population they could get their hands on. Well, the Jewish population in the Netherlands prior to the occupation was approximately 1.5% of the total. So it doesn't happen all at once, but it systematically starts to build up over time. And before 1940 was out, the early edicts targeting the Jewish population began. And here's one of the early ones. All Jews in the Netherlands, if you work in civil service jobs, government positions, or university positions like professors, you're now out of that job because you're a Jew. Well, in the history of Dutch Jews, this was only the beginning that they were getting these opportunities for these more prominent roles. So not a lot were affected, but among the most prominent of all the Jews who was affected was a man named Lodewijk Visser. His job in the Netherlands then was equivalent to the job that John Roberts does in our country today. What does John Roberts do? Civics lesson here. He's on our U.S. Supreme Court. And what role on the Supreme Court? Which one is he? That's it. Very good. The rest of these people, give them some civics lessons. Mark, you've got to take care of this afterwards here. Yes. Thank you. So Lodewijk Visser had an equivalent role in the Dutch High Court. By the end of November 1940, he was now out of that job because he was a Jew. His fellow justices in response said, that's what they said, nothing. Germans said, great, green light. They're not going to care what we do to the Jews. Let's continue. And they do. And throughout all of 1941, edict after edict keeps coming out targeting the Jewish population in the country. By the end of 1941, here was the effect. The Jewish population now has been isolated and removed from the non-Jewish population. Going to school with non-Jews, can't do. Working with non-Jews, you're out of a job. You want to attend university, Jews not allowed. You've actually owned your own business, it's been taken away. You want to go out and enjoy social recreational activities like anybody else, Jews are now prohibited. And by the start of 1942, a population shift is going on in the country. Over half the Jewish population already lives in the major city of Amsterdam. Those who don't are getting taken from their homes and placed into Amsterdam into 3 sections as ghettos. And then, May of 42, if you go out in public as a Jew, they take the symbol of Judaism, the Star of David, and now make you wear it on your clothes, a yellow badge, humiliation. So we know you're a Jew if you go out in public. And by July 1942, the trains were cranking. And they're taking the Jewish population bit by bit. When it was your turn, you went to the Dutch Theater in Amsterdam, and there they loaded you up, sent you to a little deportation center, another part of the country, and then on, primarily to the death camps in Poland, Auschwitz and Sobibor. Now, the Nazis were masters of propaganda, so they don't broadcast this. In fact, the message they broadcasted to the whole population, Jewish and non-Jewish alike, was this. We're sending the Jews to work camps in Germany. False. And to reinforce that propaganda with some of the early arrivals to the death camps, if they survived the train rides getting there, when they got off, they had postcards filled out for them. All you had to do was sign your name. And this, in effect, was the message on the postcards. Dear friends and family, life at the camp, it's not so bad. Sure, you got to work, that's not so bad. Food's decent. We look forward to seeing you soon. And that goes back to the people waiting anxiously in Amsterdam. I guess I don't need to worry after all. And this is just going to continue and continue and continue. And by the end of September 1943, the entire Jewish population the Nazi authorities could get their hands on had been deported. But the Nazi authorities in the Netherlands had this inkling. I don't think we got them all. Well, if you're a Jew in the Netherlands at this time, most don't know what's happening. Sooner or later, you're rounded up, you're gone before you can figure out its doom. But some sense that doom was going to come soon. And if you wanted to do something about it, your best hope, go into hiding. But you're going to be needing help to do that. Would anybody help? Contrary to popular belief, the answer to that question is not many. Take a guess what the vast majority of the Dutch population is doing during this period of brutality and oppression they're living under. What are most trying to do? That's right. You can't blame them. I hope I can still feed my family. I hope they don't call me off to forced labor. I'm not going to worry about anybody else. This is only over 96% of the population. Now, some of those people do feel sympathetic. They feel bad for what's happening to their fellow Jews because they notice, they go away and they don't come back. But if you rang their doorbell and said, please help, they would not open their door. How come? Yes, they were scared. Because if the Germans find out that you're involved in trying to help hide people they're after, and especially if it's Jews, and they find out, guess where you get to go? You get to go to the same camps, and they're not, summer recreational camps. Death waits you sooner or later. If you're in Poland, more often we execute you on the spot and hang you up in the neighborhood. Fear is going to keep anybody even thought about wanting to help. Nah, no thanks. Not going to worry about anybody else. Head down. Among the Dutch who played an active role in this war, you can put them in two groups. If you see my hands, the one on the left means that's more in number than the one on the right. The one on the right, resistance. So I'll save them for last. The one on the left, the sympathizers and collaborators with the Nazis. What people often don't realize is Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party, when conquering throughout all of Europe, they had a lot of help in every country they went into from the local population too, including the Netherlands. In the 1930s, we start seeing springing up in much of Europe, and including the United States, little fascist or Nazi-like parties. The Dutch had their own. It was known by its initials, NSB. And prior to the war, there were a few thousand, and the Dutch would refer to them as those NSBers. Extremist idiots. And we don't like left-wingers, we don't like right-wingers. Ignore those extremist idiots. Prior to the war, they were pretty harmless. Now we're a year into the German occupation of the country. 100,000 people had signed up and joined the NSB, the third largest Nazi party in all of Europe. Why are people signing up to get involved? They want to be on the winning team. At this point, the Germans are dominating. And if you're part of the NSB, the Germans need help running the government at all levels. You didn't have to be qualified, just loyal. Nice job. And you were much better off then. You didn't have to, much of the population had these strict ration cards for food and supplies. You ate a whole lot better. And for those who've been in the Netherlands, very important for the Dutch still today, it's not just a form of recreation, it's a key form of transportation. It's called your bicycle. And NSBers got to keep their bicycles. Many other Dutch got them taken away. It was a great opportunity to be in the NSB. Join up, be on the winning team. By the way, you want to make some money during these extra money during these hard times? Rat people out. The Germans would pay bounties if you give up somebody you think is suspicious going over there, call the authorities. Sure enough, they find those people trying to help hide Jews. Boom, they're off. The Jews are off, and they paid you money. Great way to make extra money. So you had to worry in the country, and especially in the cities, as much about your fellow Dutch as you did about the Germans. Well, this other group, resistance. Well, and this was true throughout Europe. It wasn't one group. what you're going to see over a period of time, about a half dozen core resistance groups get organized in the Netherlands involved in dangerous form of resistance, hit and run attacks, sabotage, things like that. But here was the problem for the Dutch with their resistance efforts. Not unusual. For most of the war, these groups operated independently of one another, not united. None of them had the firepower or manpower to match the Germans. And here was even an extra problem for the Dutch resistance. If you were in Poland or other parts of Eastern Europe and in these dangerous resistance groups, if you did, for example, a hit and run attack, got away fast enough, you run deep in the forest. They can't find you there. You run into the big mountain ranges. They can't find you in there. Well, I think a couple of you said you've been to the Netherlands past Amsterdam. Raise your hand again if you would, please. There you go. How many in other parts of the country beyond Amsterdam, big forests, big mountain ranges did you see? That's right. Oh, they have some trees, but not heavy forest. That's right. No big mountains, a little hilly in the south. It's a relatively flat country. By the way, bike paths wherever you go, in the cities and out. It's wonderful. So what you have in the Netherlands, though, is lots of water. The Dutch are the best water civil engineers in the world. Otherwise, half their country would be flooded. Over the years, they figured out how to control the water. And I always like to mention, when we had Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans there like 12 plus years ago, who came in after to help Americans figure out how to handle this better? Dutch water civil engineers. So if you're in these danger resistance groups, and please don't be in my neighborhood, so I don't want them to take it out on me, the innocent. If you could hold your breath underwater a long time, you'll do just fine. So what's happening to many of these resistance fighters? They're getting caught, arrested, imprisoned, deported to concentration camps, even executed. Many of them had to go into hiding too. Very tough, dangerous work. Of all the resistance groups, the one that would become the largest and most effective in the Netherlands was known by its initials LO. So here's the Dutch Nazis, and here's this group, the LO. They're part of the resistance. Let me tell you its full name in Dutch. Landelijke Organisatie voor Hulp en Onderduikers. English translation, in case you're not up on your Dutch. The National Organization for Helping People in Hiding. During the course of the war, the LO will help hide from the German authorities 300,000 people. Quite effective. But by the time the LO, well, I'll just even a little quick side note. So unusual for the time period of the 1940s. One of the founders and leaders of the LO was a woman. Second side note to how dangerous this work was. Later in the war, she got betrayed and captured and deported to a concentration camp in Germany where she dies before the war is out. So this was very dangerous work. Well, by the time the LO got this network operating around the country, mid-1943, too late to help many of the Jews. At best, among that 300,000 or so, 25,000 Jews make it into hiding. But the problem, they're the number one target. Over a third of them will get caught and deported. So those non-Jews, willing to get involved in this risky, dangerous business of helping hide people from the German authorities, you had far more non-Jews willing to help hide non-Jews. Trying to help hide a Jew? I don't know if I want to go that far. Franz and Weizsäcker, they went that far. Now I'm going to talk to you about them, and we'll take you to the next page in your handout, page 5, as we introduce a bigger picture about them first. We'll go to the next slide to see the book cover again. Because I want you to understand the meaning of this title. And even in the first group, when we were doing the book signing, people were asking kind of how this diagram come up as the cover. It's a great one for us. And it dealt with the meaning of the title from the person who did this from the publisher. When she understood the meaning, she created this, and we thought it captured the mood of the story very well. Well, this title here, Two Among the Righteous Few, the key word in the title is the word righteous. And it comes from a place, next slide please, called Yad Vashem. Dealing with my first question there. How many people have heard of the place? Well, I'm glad you're here today because you should know this place. It's a great place, and I hope you get a chance to visit one day. I have been there 3 times myself over the years. Our first group this morning, we had a couple had actually been there. This is the Holocaust Museum located in Jerusalem, Israel. The first of its kind when it was created in 1953. Nobody talked about the Holocaust or anything about the war at that point anyway. The word Holocaust is not in the English language as a term until the 1970s. But the Israeli government passed a law to create the museum. This is still the most prominent today. Today it's not unusual. There's many Holocaust museums, large or small, or little education centers around this country, other parts of the world. How many people have ever visited some kind of Holocaust museum? Not so unusual. Yes, so there's many around. This is still the most prominent. I have been there 3 times myself over the years. My last time was just 2 years ago. And the museum has expanded over the years. It's very educational, very moving. You don't go out the same way you came in, but you're going to learn a lot. What always struck me about the museum beyond its contents, this one I'm talking in particular, is who comes to visit. Every time I've been there, the place is so darn crowded. People from around the world visit this museum every day, not just people who live in Israel. Well, there's one of the functions of this museum, and in the big exhibit they'll have one section related to it, and we'll go to the next slide, and it's called Righteous Among the Nations, and that's where the word righteous comes from in the book title. This is actually an honor. This is an honor that goes to the non-Jews who during the course of the Holocaust risked their own lives to try to help save the lives of Jews. You notice the title of the book is Two Among the Righteous Few, not Two Among the Righteous Many. It wasn't a lot who did this. One, probably the most prominent of the righteous names that I think many of you would know, thanks to the movies. In 1993, Steven Spielberg directed this movie that won the Academy Award, titled, yes, in honor of Oskar Schindler, the most prominent of the righteous names. If you've gotten this truly heroic honor, this is one museum, unlike most museums of any kind, there's grounds to walk, purposely so, not just what's in the contents of the walls. And what you're going to see when you walk the grounds of this museum are plaques and trees planted for people who've gotten this honor of righteous among the nations. And they refer to that area as the Avenue of the Righteous. Well, as we go to the next slide, there's the plaque in the Avenue of the Righteous to Franz, and his wife's full name was Hermina, Mean for short, and she wasn't. Franz and Hermina Weinacher are 2 Oskar Schindlers. You go home today, your family's talking about, you learned about 2 Oskar Schindlers. When I stumbled in this story by accident, which I'm going to tell you more about a little bit later, and I got shown this picture by one of the Weinacher sons, it blew me away because I knew what that meant. You're learning it now. You don't get that for just showing up. This heroic honor came for the Weinachers in late 1983. Unfortunately, Mean, the wife, had already passed away. She died in 1980, so never knew about it. Franz, the husband, was still alive to receive the honor. He lived to 1994, almost the age of 86. So I'm going to talk about who they were. We'll go to the next page. Who they were and what they end up doing that later earned this heroic honor. So you can look to page 6 as I tell about this. And we'll go to the next slide to take you back to their country. And you see the red arrow pointing in southeastern Netherlands. That's pointing to where they lived. They were in a countryside area. Their little town was called Dieden, where most of the rest of this country is cities, large and small. And life for them in this countryside area, typical for most people who live there, was basically 3 things that were important. Here's the first. Raise a family. Very important for them. In fact, by the end of 1942, they already had 4 small children under the age of 5. How many parents in the room? Does that thought make you cringe? But they wanted a big family and hoped to have more kids. Good luck to them. Second, what was important in their lives? Work hard. Well, they lived the traditional roles of the period of the 1940s. Mean as the woman, you're expected to run the household. Oh, she ran it. Franz as the husband, you worked to support your family. He was a semi-skilled laborer. He worked at a grain mill 1 town over from Dieden. Were they well off? No. Was anybody in the area well off? Very few. But they got by. He could feed his family. They were okay. And the last thing that was important for them in this area, be good Catholics. In other parts of the country, be good Protestants. In Western Europe today, 2018, very different than it was in the 1940s. The church is losing great influence, regardless of what Christian faith. But in the 1940s, whatever Christian faith you were, the church is a huge part of your life. And in their area in particular, who was the #1 authority figure that everybody revered? The local parish priest. Occasionally when I talk in churches, when I have the pastor there, he's going, oh, I wish I could get that authority. No, it's a different world today. And that local parish priest, what he told you to do, you did it. When he said, don't do it, don't do it. And be at church every Sunday. So that was their lives. Pretty ordinary people. But they weren't. After the war broke out, Franz took a leave of absence from his job at the mill. He thought he could make a little bit more money by getting meat and eggs from farmers in the countryside near where he lives. And then he would travel on the train 2 hours to the west of the major cities there like The Hague and Amsterdam, selling this valuable food to people in the cities. This food is scarce in the country. The Germans had taken away cattle, chicken, so you don't see a lot of meat and eggs in the country. And here's this guy showing up wanting to sell you this. And then, therefore, you pay with money under the table. It's what you call a black market business, which means it's not. That's right. So don't get caught because you will be arrested. And Franz was a pretty good salesman doing it. It is now spring 1943. And Franz was on one of these business trips in Amsterdam. And he calls upon this doctor acquaintance, a customer he's done business with before. And as he's having his business meeting with the doctor and he's selling him some meat, the doctor turns to him and says, "Would you be willing to help?" And the doctor explains, "You see, we've got this young girl hiding here in the city of Amsterdam. We'd love to get her out to the countryside where you live." "Oh, what's your town again?" Franz says, "Dieden." "Yes, let's say you took her home to Dieden for 3 weeks. That way she could get a little better food, a little better fresh air. Oh, and by the way, she's Jewish. So would you be willing to help?" And this was Franz's response, "Okay." Not exactly knowing what he's getting into, but he's a helpful guy and you've asked for his help, so sure. So he's going to meet that young girl before the night is out. He only knows her by her false Dutch name, Freitje, not her real name. He doesn't even know that's not a real name initially. And by the way, she is 14, near 15. Because she's small in stature, he's even thinking maybe she's 12 years old. Well, you don't sneak somebody out of the cities during the day. Too many of the German Nazis around, the Dutch Nazis, let alone too many people around that might be suspicious and rat you out. You go out late at night. So Franz sneaks Freitje home on the train and finally gets to Dieden around midnight. There were no cell phones in those days. So when he was not home by supper time as he usually would have been, take a guess what his wife Mien was thinking and feeling. What is she thinking? What is she feeling? Yes. Did he get captured? Is he arrested, sitting in jail somewhere? I'm too worried to go to sleep tonight. And she's there, wondering and wondering. And then around midnight, he shows up unexpectedly with this young girl, and he says briefly to his wife, we're going to have this young girl stay with us here for 3 weeks. And this was Mien's response. "Well, it's late. Let's get her to bed." Whew. He dodged a bullet there. And he knew business has just begun for Franz and Mien Weinacher. Let me tell you a little bit about Freitje. Not her real name. In fact, she wasn't Dutch. She was a German Jewish girl. She and her sibling, she was one of 6, were able to get out of Germany at the end of 1938 after that horrific event some of you may have heard of called Kristallnacht, the massive rampage and riot in Germany and Austria against Jews. The Dutch government after that was willing to take in a few thousand only. The term for it was called unaccompanied children, not families. As long as there'd be Dutch Jewish families that would take care of them. So eventually, Freitje and her siblings get placed within the homes of Dutch Jewish families in Amsterdam, and life went on. They will never see their parents again. But it's a pretty good life. Her brothers and sisters don't live far away. She sees them fairly often. She learns Dutch right away. She's going to school, making new friends. In fact, one of the friends that she had, among many, this girl lived just a block down. This girl was very popular, similar in age to her. This girl had a German Jewish background as well, but she and her family got out of Germany in the early 1930s as a whole family, made a good life for themselves in Amsterdam, and when the occupation got bad, they got into hiding in time, but the problem for this family, and there were others like them, they were stuck in Amsterdam. The chance of you surviving in the cities and get through the war, slim. Not surprising they got betrayed. This was a girl, some of you may have heard of her, named Anne Frank. Well, now Freitje's been with the Weinachers for a week. And Mien comes to Franz one day and says, "You know, Franz, I've been talking with Freitje, and you know what I think I figured out? I think she's Jewish. Did you know that?" Franz said, "Yeah, I knew." "Well, she's got a younger brother still hiding in Amsterdam. Go get him." And out in the train, Franz will go, and they're going to sneak out her younger brother and call him Freitje, not his real name. And a short time after that, through these kind of former teachers in Amsterdam who, through acquaintances, had heard about this Franz Weinacher guy in the countryside, they come out on the train with a girl of 17 who happens to be Jewish, and they bring her to the home of Franz and Mien Weinacher and say, "Sure, we'll take her in too." Now there's 3 Jewish children refugees in their home with their 4 small children. Do they recognize what they've gotten into? And we talked before, the dangers, the risk. Probably not fully yet do they recognize all that they're doing, but they're going to go ahead anyway. And then comes the pivotal moment. A stranger shows up on Franz's doorstep one day and starts talking to him right away. And he only goes by this code name Long John. And initially as he's talking to Franz, he's making him very nervous. Because this Long John fellow seems to know that Franz and Mien Weinacher have 3 Jewish children refugees in their home. So Franz is wondering himself, how does this guy know this? Is he a spy? Is he with the police to arrest me? And then this Long John fellow says to him, you could be of help to us. Who is this guy? He's with the LO, that resistance group that helps hide people from the German authorities. Likely a doctor and acquaintance who he's done business with, that Franz was doing business with. Part of the LO, they've been talking. Weinacher guy, seems helpful. Countryside, good location. Let's see if we can get more help from him. So Long John now starts to explain. And Mien has joined Franz for the conversation, and he tells them, we're trying to get the remaining Jews still hiding in the cities out before it's too late. Now certainly, we'd love to get them here in the countryside, but you can't fit them all in your own home. So here's what we'd like you to do if you're willing. We can give you money to fund an operation. And we'd like you to go around the little towns in your area and recruit people to see if you can get them to take somebody in, and then you can pay them for it. Now, I don't want to kid you, he says to them. This would be risky, and this likely would be dangerous, but would you be willing to help? And Franz and Mien look at each other and without hesitation went, okay! Not exactly knowing what they're signing up for initially, but they want to be helpful. And now they go forward, and this takes over their whole life, day in and day out. Franz getting word of people coming out or going to cities and sneak them out. He's going around the local towns and seeing who he can recruit. He was a good salesman doing it. He would tell stories. While the stories that weren't actual, there was truth to them. You know, the Germans have displaced people at their home in Amsterdam, or due to the bombings in Rotterdam, or they got sick here. You know, they're going to put them on a list, and they could force you to take somebody. I can get you somebody, and I can pay you some good money for you. And by the way, the good Lord will look kindly upon you, which appealed to a lot of people. And he was getting people placed in building this network in the local communities. And all the people he was getting placed in this network he was building, from children to adults of various ages, were all Jewish. Didn't tell everybody that up front, but sooner or later they figured it out. But as this operation really picked up, so did the many challenges and dangers. And when I reflect back on the many challenges and dangers that Franz and Mien encountered, I am stunned that they actually persisted. Most people was quit. Too difficult, too dangerous. I got 4 little children to worry about. But they don't. And among the many challenges and dangers they encountered, I'm just going to highlight 2 briefly. One, and this happened with this network that Franz had built. Occasionally the term would be coming out as they call for Franz, betrayed, meaning this, Franz, you got to come. Franz, this Jewish individual we have here, got exposed. That means word will travel soon to the authorities, which means, Franz, not only are they going to come get this person, they're going to come get us. We've been betrayed. Get them out of here. And Franz cannot convince those people to keep the Jewish individual any longer. Mad scramble, trying to find another place. At the height of this, beyond this network, Franz and Mien often had 8 to 10 Jewish refugees in their own home with their 4 little children. One crowded place. And the second among many challenges and dangers they encountered that I'm going to highlight briefly deals with the first adults that Franz and Mien took in their own home after the 3 Jewish children. It was a young married couple, similar in age to them. And this couple, through the help of the LO, was able to get out of Amsterdam to the Weinachers' home in the countryside in the fall of 1943. The husband, his name was Lou. Neat thing about Lou, he was an architect by trade. And he designed and worked with Franz to build a hiding room in their house. In 1944, as that rolls around, German presence starts to pick up in this area. Thank goodness for that hiding room. Well, Lou's wife, her name was Angeline. When she's arrived at the Weinacher home in the fall of 1943, she has a secret she can no longer keep secret. She's already pregnant. How do you have a baby born to a Jewish woman in Nazi-occupied Holland? It's basically impossible. Well, when this was finally over, this didn't just go on for 2 weeks or even 2 months. This went on for nearly 2 years. In the end, Franz and Mien Weinacher saved the lives of over 24 Jews from certain death, and miraculously, nobody got caught. As we see the next slide, you can see why later on they earned this heroic honor of righteous among the nations. Now, the last thing I'm going to cover in my presentation before we open up the floor to a few questions deals with my own meaningful personal connection to the story. So on this one, I understand so much more today than before I ever got involved in this story. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt from the book to give you some insight into it. Let me first introduce this piece. As I've been on this journey now, well into 7 years, around 630 events, never expected that, I have been fortunate to have a great supporter with me along the way. And I brought her with me here today. It happens to be my wife, Leah Bars, and here she is. Yes, applause is welcome, yes. Thank you very much. My wife, Leah, it turns out, and her family, are immigrants from the Netherlands themselves. They moved to the United States when she was in the 8th grade, not far from her 14th birthday, to a place called Los Angeles. For those who've traveled the Netherlands, you know Los Angeles, much better weather. You think of the Netherlands, for those who haven't been there, think of Seattle. Rainy, gray, damp quite often. Nice country, great to visit, but not quite the level of Los Angeles. Guess what she really took to right away? The Santa Monica beaches. She loved it there. And she even goes on to high school. In fact, what was holding her back getting through high school was American television. She loved watching television. Her mom ever wondered if she'd get out, I tell this to kids in school, would she ever get off the couch and do her homework? But eventually she did graduate from high school. For anyone who knows Los Angeles, Fairfax High School. And then she goes on to university and graduates from a place called UCLA. And she started a career as a teacher down there in Los Angeles. And after a few years there, she moved to Northern California, a place called San Francisco. And she continued a fine career in education, the bulk of it as a school psychologist, happily retired today, as she reminds me of often. And she raised 2 daughters along the way, young adult daughters doing fine in their lives today. Later in life, she picked me up. And now we're a little over 11 years, and she tells me we are happily married, so I believe what I'm told. It is May 2009. And at this point in my wife, Leah's life, it has been 25 years since she was last back to her original homeland. There's nobody left, friends or family, that she knows, but a burning desire to go back to the original homeland and see places she never even got to see as a kid as well. And at this point, I had never been at all. So we go for this special trip, 6 weeks, having a wonderful time traveling around the country. And then 2/3 or so into it, we stumble into something by accident that I thought was so significant. I end up writing a letter to her 2 daughters, Shoshana and Alana, and that's the piece I'm going to read to you now. By the way, one last thing. If you knew my wife as a child in the Netherlands, less would you know her by her name Leah, much more what you would know her by her Dutch nickname Ineke. So please keep that in mind. Chapter 1, Historic Moment. Dear Shoshana and Alana, today is Tuesday, May 26, 2009. I'm writing to share more than just travel stories from a wonderful journey your mom and I are having. I want to document something to you that I hope you'll find of much value for your own family history. While I know some of the history, and you probably do too, coming in contact with the reality of it merges mind and heart into something of great significance. I will explain shortly. Being in the Netherlands, much more than in the United States, one is reminded of World War II and the Holocaust as well. When we started our trip in Amsterdam, we visited the Anne Frank House. It is a wonderful educational museum. Last Friday, we visited the museum and site of Camp Westerbork. Before World War II, there were 140,000 Jews who lived in the Netherlands. Over 75% perished during the Holocaust. Westerbork was the deportation center the Nazis used to ship the Dutch Jews off to the death camps in Poland. We arrived last evening in the city of Eindhoven in the south of the country. Of the places your mom's family lived prior to immigrating to the U.S., Eindhoven was where they were the longest. Before arriving there yesterday, we stopped in an old town named Ravenstein. It is the big, small town in an area of villages in a southern section of the country. It is also near where your grandparents were hidden during the war. As we stop and walk around the charming 1600s historic downtown of Ravenstein, all 2 blocks of it, we spot a tourist information office. We go in, and your mom asked the staff members about the location of, next slide please, about the location of an old church, this is an old vacant church, about the location of an old church in the nearby small town of Dieden, and of the home that once belonged to Franz Weinacher is still next to it. For the older folks of this area, which the three office people on hand were, the name of Franz Weinacher is a notable one. They tell your mom not only how to get to this church, but also that one of the Weinacher sons still lives in this particular house. So off we go down the road to Dieden. About 10 minutes later, we find the church in question. We park our car there and walk over to the house next door. As we walk up the driveway, we see a few people sitting at a table in the front yard on this warm day, and we see, next slide please, we see the word Shalom written on the front side of the house, probably a foot in size. Your mom boldly walks up to the gentleman sitting there and says in Dutch, "Hello, I'm Ineke Bars." A roar goes up along with a warm handshake. This man and his wife sitting with him know who Ineke Bars is and much more the significance related to her. And the next few minutes, the Dutch starts flying and phone calls start happening. Within 10 minutes, his youngest sibling, Irene, drives over and joins in the lively discussion, which, by the way, was all in Dutch, so I could only watch. The man who has greeted us is Franz Weinacher Jr. He is the youngest son of the aforementioned Franz Weinacher. His father, Franz, with the support of his mother, Mien, saved your grandparents and your mom, baby Ineke, during World War II. They all survived the Holocaust because this Catholic man and his wife hid them and other Jews and helped even more hide from the Nazis. Do you recognize the significance of this moment? Franz, the son, and his wife, also named Irene, visited Israel themselves last year. They showed us a blown-up picture of the memorial plaque and tree planted in Yad Vashem's Avenue of the Righteous section in honor of their parents, which was when the historic significance of what I was witnessing really hit me. After visiting for over an hour, they've invited us to come back Wednesday evening. They have 3 other siblings who are all alive and living in the local area, so your mom would like to meet more of the Weinacher family who she last saw 25 years ago. Thank you for the oohs and ahs. And we'll take questions for a few minutes on the story before we move into discussing the lessons to apply from it. But to start things off, you got your microphone. We're going to have this question, make sure. And what is your name? Chris, if you would, and Jenny will help you with the mic.
So what happened when you came back for that visit with the family that Wednesday?
Good question, Chris. Very good. Yes.
That was my question, too.
Yes. I could tell. That's how I just finished reading this piece, so Chris was right on top of that. That's a logical first question to start with. I'd like to answer it this way, and I'm going to put you in our lives present day here. You know, we had shown up unexpectedly. And let's say you have a brother or sister in the area living close by, and they give you a call one night. And they say, "So-and-so just came into town. You know, it's like 25 years ago we last saw her." Yeah, I remember her. She's here with her husband, fine. Could you come over tomorrow night to visit with them? Here's the answer I know of so many people here today. It would go like this: "Oh, I wish I could. Well, this happening with work, kids in school, or grandchildren, or technology toys that absorb my attention these days. Sorry, send them my regards." Well, when the Weinacher siblings, and now there's 5, the youngest was born, Irene there I mentioned in the piece, born after the war. When they heard, and they think of my wife born by her Dutch nickname Ineke, when they heard Ineke Bars was in town, please show the last slide. All 5 came that evening. They were not going to miss this opportunity. This is one of the pictures you have in the book. This was one happy, very special reunion. Not that I know I'm going to write a book at this point, but the sparks are happening this night. And I'll introduce you to the family in a moment, but I want to tell you what was unique about that evening. For those who travel in the Netherlands, you know it's an easy country for Americans to travel in. Western culture, vast majority of Dutch speak multiple languages, especially English. They, in this picture, in their late 60s, early 70s, they grew up in the countryside. They do not speak much English, and I speak even less Dutch. That whole night, the conversation was all in Dutch, and I did not feel out of place. It was just neat to watch the reunion happening, and my wife, who can still speak Dutch, would translate some things for me and ask questions on my behalf, but it was a very special evening. They were very happy to reconnect. Neat thing for us, by the way, since I've been involved with this story, but it just happened anyway because we like to travel. We've been back to Europe on a few occasions since this May 2009 trip, and on 3 of those times, back into the Netherlands. And the one on the far right, I'll introduce you to the family in a moment, that's the oldest, Nellie. And when she heard we're going to be in the country those 3 other times, the last was 2 years ago, May of 2016, she said, you also make sure you come stay with us too. So we have spent more time with her and her brothers and sisters and met some of the children and grandchildren they all have. Well, as I later put the story together, the point person was Nellie, the oldest. And Nellie, who we saw 2 years ago, just now recently turned 80. It looks no different than that picture. She's 80 going on 50, if you catch my drift here. This lady is just full of energy. Good luck if you can keep up with her. You want to run her warehouse, she'd do a good job for you. Yes, she is amazing. Between Nellie and my wife is the youngest of the 3 brothers, Franz Weinacher Jr., who lives in the actual house where the rescue activities of their parents took place. He owns it today. It was a rental then. It's been remodeled. After my wife is the youngest, born after the war, Irene, and the other 2 brothers, Jan and Thijs, all who supported me doing this book about their parents. Thank you for your question. What else can I answer for about the story here? Well, you want to throw one from this morning? Go ahead.
The larger LO group, how many, sorry, mic on? Yes, Mark, thank you. The larger LO group, how many people do you think were saved across?
Well, we know they got into hiding 300,000. And most, and I don't know the exact number, most got saved from doing this. But it was quite, now not that everyone involved gets saved. You know, that some people lost their lives or certainly got arrested and deported for it. Dangerous work, but they were quite successful. Just not enough for the Jews. They weren't able, by the time they got going, it was too late to help many of the Jews. They do help some. Okay, again, but over 75% of the Dutch Jewish population perished. So, some help, but not enough. Good. Any other final question before I move ahead into our discussion phase? Yes?
Wait till I pull back there.
Has anyone done the math between the over 24 people who were saved and the amount of children that they had to determine?
It's a
really
great
how many
question.
lives were affected?
Not that I know of. As I go back later to build this story, and the family certainly was helping me through different means, doing some long distance interviewing with Nellie, she said, as far as we know, the people that our parents helped, you know, we've lost touch, but we think most of them are not alive, so they don't know for certain. But they know, and I'll give you an example, though, we know in one case, and likely you can multiply that through others. And this person, it's going to be one of the pictures you have in the book, she also was helpful for me in building this story, Freitje. They put us in touch with Freitje. Who's Freitje? Say again? That's right. First ones who they took into hiding as a young teenager who's still alive today. Her real name's Shula Schwartz. She lives in Haifa, Israel. One of the pictures you're going to see in the book is Shula Schwartz present day, because we got to meet her in person late April 2010 in Haifa, Israel. What a wonderful lady. And we have been back once since. 2 years ago, prior to going to the Netherlands, we went to Israel first, and we saw Shula again. This weekend, she turns 90. What a wonderful lady. So to your question, at least I'll speak in terms of Shula. She had a 50-year marriage. She got into Israel after the war, made her life there. 50-year marriage, unfortunately a widow today, but a wonderful marriage. 3 children, 13 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren. Thank goodness she met a guy named Franz Weinacher and got out of Amsterdam. She probably wouldn't be here today. So you can, in essence, make your guesses to what they did saves not just the current, but future generations. And we've gotten to meet some of her family. Wonderful lady. Wonderful lady. Thank you for that. Any other final questions on the story before I move ahead? Go ahead.
What inspired you to write the book? Is it, I suppose, the history that you described to us, that's something that you knew before, or that?
Well, I knew some of this history. I've learned a lot more since. And I even do other related talks today about other heroes of the Holocaust. But to your question, what inspired me, can I bounce it back to you? What do you think? Make your guess. You maybe can draw conclusions from just hearing this portion that I've done so far. You haven't even read the book yet. What do you think?
I think you saw a lot of lessons that you can share with people that they can apply to their lives and workplace.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. By
And
the
wh-
way, I didn't realize I've been to Yad Vashem 6 years ago.
Oh.
So
There you go. Well, glad you remember now. Yes, yes. Very good. Yeah, to what you're saying. And actually, I've realized that more since I started the journey. I didn't know that fully coming in. But that's the encouragement I keep getting. And we're going to get into that discussion. Good segue about lessons. The other thing, among many things, and my wife would probably say, is in simple terms, and I'll even probably add a little bit more in the close, I'm the humble messenger for two real heroes. And that word gets misused in American culture all the time. We attach it to movie stars and sports stars and not even real people, call them superheroes and do movies on them. None of those people are heroic. Great performances, great entertainment. These two people, when most wouldn't, save people's lives. You don't get more heroic than that. That struck me. And now, who knows, I keep going. Much to my chagrin or my wife's chagrin sometimes, but here we keep going. So thank you. Thank you for your wonderful question. We had one more. Yes?
Just curious how the story was discovered, I guess. Once the war ended, how did it go from being discovered and making it to the museum, or kind of how did it
Yes.
build momentum?
Well, in
and
essence,
be
you know,
famous?
after the war, life goes on. You don't even talk about this, and they didn't much either. You don't talk about it. What ends up happening in the Weinacher's case, that's what we'll talk in particular, is as the kids were growing up and more into their adult years, not me, Franz, they'd hear him tell little snippets of stories. Late in his life, a friend of the family sat him down, with the family helping pay for it, and said, we've been hearing little bits, I want you to just tell us all that you can remember. And this person for the family put together a little self-published Dutch book. The family gave us that book. And much of what goes in here, I was able to build off of that. It's like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces missing. But that was kind of the gist of it. What also made a difference is when the actual official honor came of Righteous Among the Nations. Because then the local towns woke up. And in the summer of '84, after the recognition had now come, they put on a parade and dinner for local hero Franz Weinacher. So this is years later. Now people will talk about it. Now there's that admiration for it. That little self-published Dutch book that they gave to me and supported me using it and building off of it. So it's all later in life things that it comes. But luckily Franz had a pretty good memory. So while I never got to meet him directly and interview him, through that book I got to know him. And then the family, of course, helped fill in a lot of the blanks, and Shula did as well, let alone my own historical research. All right, here's what I want you to do is we're going to now start thinking about applying the lessons of the story. Thank you for that segue. I'm going to give you a little food for thought. Let me take you to page 7. As I continue to study about not only Franz Weinacher, but others, righteous heroes, other non-Jews like them who got this honor, there have been some studies done on samples of them, and while they came from a variety of backgrounds, no commonality there, for many, not all, there were some common qualities of character. And I've kind of put the list that I've gleaned that Franz and Weinacher shared in many of these qualities of character. I'm going to walk through these quickly with you because I want you to start thinking about how do I make a positive difference in my job, and you don't have to deal with life and death risks. So I'm going to want you to put that aside when you start brainstorming about this. But let me walk through this list. Number 1 there, compassion. What's the word mean? Say it again. That's right. Caring about others beyond yourself. I often say, if I had a special powder today and I would sprinkle it on people and it would forever become their behavior going forward, it would be the powder of compassion. I'd start in Washington, D.C. first, work out from there. Just think if we had people that said, okay, we got some challenges, let's bring compassion into helping us work through it. Wow. Franz Weinacher had plenty of compassion, and other righteous often did too. Number 2, what's empathy mean? That's right. Emotions to information, where they're coming from, their perspective. Very good. Understanding, key word, very good. And a sensitivity attached. And we found in the case of many of the righteous, the Jews they're trying to help, sometimes they understood the dangers better than the Jews themselves who didn't want to, especially the younger ones who didn't want to deal with all this and let me live my life. It's not a normal situation. That empathy went a long ways to help. Number 3, key phrase, calm under pressure. Many of the different righteous, because the Germans did not waste time. They acted on all sorts of things with all sorts of, this is the first organized group of terrorists. We just didn't use that word then. They were terrorists. And so they struck fear and punishment and brutality among many people, including the Weinachers. You'll be reading about it. They got tested. And if you're all nervous and stressed out, which would be easy to do, let alone even when the Germans aren't around, it's easy to get stressed out by all this, you're a dead giveaway. And it's amazing how many of the righteous had these big challenges and just could act for the situation, play the part, stay calm under pressure. It's a great quality just doing your job, because they're stressed all the time, and you're not dealing with life and death risk. Number 4, what's the word ethics mean? Hopefully you got some. What's it mean? Knowing right from wrong and living accordingly. This is one of the real things that often gets lost. I'll just talk about in the work world. I mean, just listen to the headlines in the papers and news today. We see so many stories of people who lost their ethics, who look the other way as the harassment and the brutalities are going on, especially leaders. These people, in many cases, some of them got it from their family upbringing. In Fran's case, his father was a very ethical man that passed it on. Knowing right and wrong. They were good at that. Number 5, what's the word egalitarian mean? And that's how you treat other people. And that's how they do it. You know, people have prejudices. But most of these righteous were able to manage those prejudices and say these are still individuals that need to be treated with equality and respect. Number 6, independent-minded. They could think for themselves, not get caught up with the group think. The Holocaust is probably the greatest example of mob mentality gone awful. So many people just mindlessly who just got involved and carried out the death and destruction. I was just following orders. What an awful excuse. These people knew different and could think for themselves and not go with the flow or look the other way, which ties into number 7. The dislike of intolerance. One of the qualities that many of these had is when they got a sense of the persecution going on, they were extremely bothered by it. One of my favorite was a guy also from the Netherlands, Arnold Douwes. He first spent some time in the 1930s in the United States. He immigrated here for a few years. He got deported out of the United States because he was in a restaurant in Chicago and the restaurant manager would not serve this black gentleman dinner. So he was now creating a big scene in the restaurant, giving the guy his food. He got arrested, he got deported. This is the United States, folks. 1930s is a different time. There's still issues today with racism in this country. And you saw that. I mean, he acted out more than most, but that was a common quality of many of them, that they saw intolerance and thought, that's wrong. Don't look the other way. Great quality as a leader, too. Can you not turn your back when something wrong is going on in your group? Number 8. Probably a lot of you guessed that one. Franz Weinacher, you can probably almost guess. Why did that doctor acquaintance even ask him to see if he wanted to help? He's a risk taker. And that can help you in your jobs, too, by the way. Don't sit back. Sometimes you got to take a little risk to make good things happen. And last, what's the word hospitable mean? That's right. Welcoming and that willingness to help. There's another powder if I could sprinkle on people, I'd be sprinkling that one all over. With that in mind, look to page 8. Read what I have for you here on page 8. So I want you to take a moment individually and jot down 2 or 3 thoughts of specific actions, not general platitudes. Specific actions I can take, apply. Don't worry about the life and death risk. You don't have to deal with that. But the lessons this story teaches you, you can put into your jobs. Take a couple minutes and jot those down, please. All right, here's what I'd like you to do next. Those groups you were in during the cultural committee activity, please gather with bring your handouts, your pen, and gather and be together with that group, and then wait for your next instruction. So go join your group.
They were trying to get it out of you.
Oh, I mean, it'll come. We save that to the end. They didn't ask it directly, so although I would have deferred it anyway. Yeah. No, a great group. Were you in a group before?
Yeah, sort of. We were kind of the latecomers group.
Or you can.
Just looking for the rest of our group.
All right. And if you want to join another group if you don't remember.
You can go back and join Emily and that last back row, Emily and Julie and go back there if you want.
All right, groups, please give me your attention to the front here for a moment. So what I want you to do is in your group, let each individual share the actions they were writing down, their ideas. Hear it, you like it, add it to your list as you go along. So you're in essence comprising one from your team here, and I'm going to guess I'm going to give you about 5-6 minutes for this discussion. You're going to have 6 to 8 or something useful actions, real actions. The thing to push one another for is stay away from general platitudes. You know, be a good person. Yeah, fine. Actions you can take and apply in your job. That's what you want to get down. So share, note, 5-6 minutes, then we'll see what you come up with. Go to it. Hi, beautiful baby. So, did you pick out your pan? Okay. Just a suggestion, if you wish. It's okay to even sit down and have the discussion, too, if you want. So you make sure you're writing as you're talking. Are all the books out on the table now? Can you check? Okay. It looks like a good chunk. Good. No, I'm okay. I got water up there, so thank you. Thank you. I'm all set. And again, note as they come out in your discussion onto your own individual list. We're going to give you about 2 more minutes to keep sharing. You got your mic ready to go team running? She's my handy assistant. Or you can stay with your team because we're going to pull from teams. Okay. All right. Get ready. You want us? We'll start in the back and work our way up. Okay. Oh, all right. So we'll start here then, and then you can work it from there. All right, may I have everyone's attention back to the front, please? Come on back. If you can just turn to face the front there. So excuse me for interrupting. Good discussions going on. Some of you could even go longer. Terrific. What I'm going to do is we're going to take it a team at a time. We're going to ask you to share one action that you can apply in your job that came out of your team discussion. I'll be posting them up here. Anything that's in addition to what you already have, please add to your list. So Jenny's going to start with this team over here. Fire away, please. Hold on, everybody. We got starting over here. Go ahead.
I think with anybody in any job, it's basically having awareness for people's strengths and weaknesses and recognizing that you can help in the area where their weaknesses are instead of look down on that weakness.
Ah. Oops. You're saying a lot there. Good. They could use some help to help shore up the weaknesses, or to overcome them. The idea that you're willing to help, terrific. Applies in every job. Very good. All right, let's continue. Next team.
Let's go with empathy because it's really important to, for myself, really understand individuals and their backgrounds and consider the things that they've been through in life.
And what's the best way to achieve empathy? By doing what?
I would just say getting to know them and talking to them.
And how do you do that?
Patience.
And there's a key word that gets into that whole effort, because it's less the talking, it's more the other side. Yeah, that's right. And you hit it very well. If I can listen to understand, I can get to know people, their own individual histories, their own work styles, their pluses, their minuses, and all that. And it starts here, that willingness to listen. It can apply in everybody's job. Good one. Let's keep going. Next team, please.
I think we can piggyback off of Vince. We kind of have the same opinions where, you just take initiative to reach out to people. You don't know what they have going on in their life. And be open, right? And I think, like you said, listening is the key element there.
Certainly. All right, good. Let's continue. Next team Jenny's coming to. Here we go.
To have the ability to be independent-minded and have the strength to voice your own opinion as opposed to going with the status quo. and recognizing that by communicating your opinion, you could be adding to the discussion or adding to the ideas and making people think in a different way than what everybody else was thinking.
Yes, very good. Opinion, and I like your term, strength to voice it. We don't always get invited. Sometimes you have to take that initiative to speak up. To have that strength, that confidence, makes a big difference. Very good. Let's keep going. Back into the cheap seats there.
Look in the mirror to ensure you're reflecting ethical values. So not just stating them, or just make sure you're reflecting those as well. When people see you, they see what you're actually representing.
Well, this is the whole idea that actions speak louder than intentions. I can't see your intentions, but I see your actions. And if your actions, and especially decisions you make, show those ethical values, then you are reflecting them. But you've got to be able to really make sure it guides what you do. Not easy. And part of your whole point implied, the only way that works is on a consistent basis, not every other day. Well, that's good. Let's keep going. Next.
So we actually talked about a lot of the things that you guys have already talked about, but just to kind of piggyback off of that, just being able to speak up and ask questions and not be afraid. And that's really all it is, because it can be really intimidating to ask something when you feel like there's something holding you back, or you just feel like you're not confident, but still doing that is super important for everybody.
Well put. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm going to share with you a generalization, so it's not true in every case. In the days I used to be active in my business and on the leadership development trainings I used to do, this was my ground rule coming in. I want you to learn like a 10-year-old. And I'm talking about with groups of adults. Because 10-year-olds, generally speaking, it's before they get into teen years, are curious. And they're not afraid to ask questions. I have seen too much in my many years of experience in many organizations, too many adults that forgot how to ask questions. You don't learn if you don't ask. You don't make anything better if you don't question what's going on. Help me understand this change we're going through. I don't want to, it's the old, there's no such thing as a dumb question. The dumbest thing you do is not to ask. So you hit a very important one that applies every job. Very good. Let's keep going.
Should I give it to Mark?
So I think everyone's already mentioned some of the points that we discussed, but I just want to bring out that being helpful and hospitable is important. When I think about it, when we think about it in regards to our guiding principles within Meyer, I feel that when you have a helpful and hospitable character to yourself, you're open to communication, collaboration, responsibility, respect, and commitment, both in your personal life and here at Meyer.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying in the way you do your job, helpful and hospitable being common actions you take. Very helpful. Very good. Keep going. Next team.
I'm just going to share a little bit of what everyone in our group mentioned. One of them is to ask questions, be respectful, respect others more than yourself, take the time to learn and grow someone else. And let's see. Make a commitment to doing the right thing and be courageous.
Wow. All right. So you gave us more than one there. You're rolling here.
I'm trying to share everything.
I couldn't keep on. No, that's okay. We got still a couple more teams. So don't steal other thunder. So I grabbed a couple that you said here. We'll hold off on the others. There's a word in this one. Take the time to learn and help grow others. There's a word that defines this. This has been a big part of what my consulting business was for many years when I used to run it. Learn to mentor. Can you mentor others? Whether you're a manager or just somebody who's been around, has experience, that can share the knowledge and give the guidance and support. That's mentoring. You have a much more productive workplace when that's the behavior that people look to do. So, great. Very good. Let's continue with the next team. Just one, please.
Just one. Being open-minded. So I think oftentimes we gathered and all that, and we talked. But I think there's a point of views and perspective to certain things. But we're not being open-minded to certain things, and we forget sometimes what we do is we shut them down. Therefore, you can't, get the all the perspective that they want to share. Therefore, you have people now doesn't want to come forward, instead of stepping back, says,
That's
okay,
right.
last time I got shut down, now I won't say anything no more.
That's right. So you've got to be able to consider that. Don't have to agree with it. Can I at least let it be heard? Very good. And we have a couple more teams left.
I don't even think I need a microphone, but our group spoke a lot about the compassion, empathy, respect as well. I guess personally, just to be different than everybody else, I would specify calm under pressure. I'm sure I'm not the only department that has things running smoothly, and then suddenly a wrench gets thrown into the works, and it's really how your team actually responds to those
Yes, the challenges,
situations, those
the issues, yes, that arise. That's when we need you most to be calm under pressure. That's when it's easiest to lose it. This is so important quality, to just exercise normally. It helps you work through them so much better. And this team here.
We looked at egalitarian views,
Yeah.
and just at Meyer, we have obviously different ranks from the bottom to the top, and just treating everybody the same, giving everybody the same respect, trying to help everybody as much as you can. So pretty much just the guiding principle of respect. Everybody's the same, and you should respect everyone.
Regardless of title.
Exactly.
Very good. Very good. Yep. Great. All right. Wonderful list. And I'll do a kind of a last call. Any that came up in the teams that we didn't get up here, because we got quite a list, but anything in addition?
I guess we got one over here.
Where's that? Oh, good.
Right here. Basically, be an advocate of self, advocate of others, and advocate of all.
So explain what you mean by be an advocate.
Taking chances or risks on behalf of others for the benefit of them.
Good, good. The idea of speak up, support others. Definitely. Good one. Any others that people would add we didn't get up here? Yes.
There's the floor wasn't so loud. And I thought, what we do today, will it matter tomorrow? Basically, you make choices, and is it just something that's long-lasting, or will it really take on and someone remember the choices that we've made? And it also could be a different perspective of, if something happens today that bothers you, will it really matter tomorrow, or do you let it go?
And that's the old think before you speak. Look to tomorrow, not just now, to formulate what are you going to do about it. Great. Very good. Any others? You're getting true, valuable lessons sparked by this story. So here's what I want you to go back to page 1. All right, on page 1, time to answer that question. 1, no more than 2 commitments. What actions? Be specific. You got a lot that have come up in our discussion. Pick 1 or 2 most applicable to yourself. Please note them there. Then we'll close shortly. Oh, wow. Wow. A survivor. Wow. Yeah, he was saying something. So very interesting. Yeah. Things hit home. All right, let me just quickly hear a couple of actions you're going to commit to apply in your jobs. And I think this is Ben. Tell me one for you, please.
I said, kind of as a manager now, but just taking the time to encourage others to speak up and empower them to do so.
Very good. Good one. Let me get one more. We'll come on over this side here. And what is your name? Martino. What did you have?
I kept it pretty simple, but treat others the way you want to be treated.
Okay, and that hopefully is
it's
with
a golden
respect.
rule, but I think, you know, we forget.
Right.
So.
Yes, very good. Very good. As common practice. Very good. What I'm going to recommend, two things. One, go pull this sheet out, put it somewhere visible, because out of sight, out of mind. To make this, I'm going to put these lessons into practice. Two, and then I'm talking to the cultural committee. Raise your hand if you're on that committee. Oh, they are. More of them were maybe this morning. There's some or willing to admit you're on the committee. And a possible follow-up activity, since I know you pull people together periodically, would be have people share. So what was your commitment? You know, come back a month or two later. What was your commitment? How have you been doing with it? And then people can then share, because reinforce this. That's the idea behind it. Go put these into action. That's what this is all about. Apply these lessons. My final thing as we bring this to closure, I'm going to just go back to the story for a moment. And we're going to get a final question answered that pulls things together. We'll go to this gentleman. What is your name? Vince, if you would, please.
So whatever happened with that baby?
Could everyone hear him? Nice and loud, one more time.
So whatever happened with that baby?
Ah, good question, Vince. Yes. And what Vince is referring to was that one of the challenges I talked about that the Weinackers encountered with that young married Jewish couple, and she's already pregnant. That's the maybe. Yes. Yeah, we want to make sure you get that. Some people may know. Well, first, venture a guess. What do you think is the answer? Oh, okay. Oh, my wife's mom. Okay, so we got two different guesses going. And I know that throws people sometimes. Yes. That's right. You got a 50-50 chance on that one. So let's get that clarified. What do you think, girl or boy? All right, you're on the right track. Well, all right, so here's the short answer. Chapter 11. It explains the whole thing. And by the way, come see us at the end, because you get a book and we'll even sign it for you. So please come back. But yes, what is your name? Stephen and the others. This team was picking up on some things. You know what happened? It's been a little over 11 years. I married that baby, and I get to call her my wife. And here she is, folks. Yes. Thank you. Hi, beautiful baby. When I say I have a very meaningful personal connection to this story, it doesn't get any more meaningful and personal than this for me, folks. What inspired me, this is an element. Because when we were doing this trip, and the Weinacker name meant nothing to me in May of 2009, I'd heard it before. I understand it so much more today. I knew about her beginnings. In fact, early in our relationship, so unusual for her, because she didn't talk about her life as a Holocaust past in her family. She told me. It was our second date. Whoa. Must have told you something going on here. That was 17 years ago. 17 years ago, but I understand it so much more today. But I already understood things about the Holocaust, having knowledge, even once was teaching in my early days, because her parents are Holocaust survivors. Her dad was part of three sons. He's the only one that survived. Neither did his parents. Her mother was one of 5 brothers and sisters, and the only one that survived. But I understand, again, so much more today, since by this accidental visit, and Franz Weinacker Jr. holds up that picture of the plaque. See, I knew what that meant. I'm blown away. So that back to the question, a very good question, what inspired me? I just kind of I haven't been the same since. Because I really understand what this is all about. And I'll just give you a little insight, because you're going to get to read. They faced many challenges and dangers. I'm still stunned that they didn't quit. Let alone, as you'll read the book, we've had many people tell us, I kept waiting for them to get caught. And luckily they didn't. But when this is her parents, the architect and his wife, and she's already pregnant, her mother, I know Sometimes people think it might have been her mother as the one. My wife was actually older when we first met. Now she's younger than me. She keeps doing that. But her parents, the architect and his wife, Lou, and later then they moved to the United States, Lynn Bars, she's already pregnant. How do you deal with that? It's impossible. You can't take her mother to the local hospital and have the birth done there. The Nazi authorities track all that. They're reporting out all the time. She'd have been on a train to the death camp the next day. Well, I won't tell you how they pulled this off, but I'll give you a little bit of insight. Franz and Mien came up with a strategy, and they shared it with their parents, who agreed to the strategy. And this is what the strategy is. And they weren't sure how to execute it when they came up with it. However we get this baby born, when we do, we will register her with the authorities as our child. So she could be a baby with our small children rather than a baby in hiding. I've mentioned we've had a chance to come back 3 times to visit more with the Weinacher family. And Nellie there you see on the far right. In a subsequent visit, 2 years later from this first accidental visit, we'd been there for 3 days. And as we were getting ready to leave, and this is when you know you had a good visit, because in the little bit of English she can speak, she says to me, "When are you coming back?" And then with tears in her eyes, she hugs my wife very closely and says in Dutch, "Dag, mijn oorlogzuster." Goodbye, my war sister. She's a reminder to them of how proud they are of their parents, because their parents performed a miracle. They got this baby born, and they kept her and her parents safe and together till Liberation finally came. I say, thank God for the courage and compassion of Franz and Mien Weinacher. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Come see us in the back table.
Remember, the new revised version of the book, The Righteous Few, Two Who Made a Difference, is available at squareonepublishers.com and amazon.com. The audio version, narrated by the author, Marty Brownstein, is available from audible.com.